And welcome to Around the Ozark Spotlight. Each week, we uncover the stories behind the people who live and work here in Southwest Missouri. Those individuals with entrepreneurial spirit who like to work to develop the lives of others or put pen to paper to write books about the stories and history of the Ozarks and its people. I'm your host, Scott Meyer, and today we're exploring the world of a famous person, someone you've known, life after politics, former auctioneer, former radio host, and I'm afraid I have to say former U.S. Congressman, Billy Long. Hey, Billy, how are you?
Hey Scott, how you doing today?
I love having you on the program because, Billy, you can give us insight into any number of things. But I think first and foremost, on any listeners' minds, and certainly supporters' minds, are what are you up to? You've been out of the Congress now for almost a year and a half, two
Yeah, a
years?
little over a year. Yeah,
Yeah.
January 3 of 2023, I made parole. My 12-year sentence was over, so I'm back on the streets. And in Congress, after Congress, you got to be kind of careful what you do for a year because they're afraid you might lobby some of your former colleagues or whatever. And so that first year out of Congress, I kind of thought of what I wanted to do. And Commerce Terrace Consulting here in Springfield, who's a tax
Mhm.
advice and strategy company that's been around a long time. They were getting into the employee retention tax credits that we passed in Congress twice. It's actually a tax law change. We passed it under Donald Trump, and then we passed it again with 8 amendments under Joe Biden, helping small businesses get their own money back from the IRS. And what it was an incentive program for people to keep their people on the payroll during COVID. Now, we
Mhm.
did PPP, we did 2 rounds of that. And PPP, we printed money we did not have. We passed it out willy nilly. We said, oh, by the way, you don't need to pay us back. And we
Mhm.
did 2 rounds of it, ran up the national debt terribly. But this was pretty ingenious, this employee retention credits, because all we did was say, hey, we'll give you your money back that you pay in on your employees. And
Sure.
had a banner year in that. And then in September, the IRS said, hey, we're going to slow down on this because I'm sure you got calls. I got calls every day. I got calls from
Mhm.
my last year in Congress, cold calls that, oh, Mr. Long, we've looked and you qualify. You qualify. You get up to $26,000 per employee. Call now. Time's wasting. And they hadn't checked me out because I hadn't had an employee in 12 years. So there was a lot of those fly by night startups that were
Oh,
trying
sure.
to, game the system. And unfortunately, a lot of the good small business people right here in Southwest Missouri have been caught up in the fact that we did it. There's local accounting firms that did it. There's law firms that did it for folks. And we all dotted our I's, crossed our T's, did it the right way, not like these fly by night companies. But
Mhm.
still, when they called a halt to it September 15 and said, we're not going to send out any more checks until we kind of get it sorted out. And we were hopeful it would be done by the end of the year because they said, we're not going to send out any more checks until at least the end of the year. Well, here we are in April, and we still don't have a lot of people haven't, gotten their final check. A lot of people got 80% of what they had coming. Some got zero. But so we're working through all that and helping people get their money there. I'm going out next week to Boise, Idaho. My sister lived in Idaho and Sun Valley for like 45 years and recently moved back to Springfield. But
Mhm.
going out there on a conference on the Flex method, which is a tax retirement program that's tax free. And so it's, going to be interesting to get involved in that too, along with the research
Sure.
and development tax credits that we do here at Commerce Terrace Consulting.
Billy, let's take a step back for a minute. I thought of calling myself about a year and a half ago to maybe get involved in Missouri politics, and I researched it pretty thoroughly. I know I called you for your help as well, and uh, it, you don't realize. I don't think most people realize just how much time and how much reputation and how much family and how much everything is put on the line to get into politics. Yet 12 and a half, 13 years ago, you decided to leave behind the business world and went to Congress, went to Washington, D.C. Tell me about that. How did that work with your conversation with your wife about saying, I want to do this and honey, we're going to pack our bags and move to D.C. for a while?
Well, we've been in August, it'll be 40 years. So Barbara's kind of used to, and she knows if I set my mind to something and say I'm going to do it, that I'm going to do it. And I just thought it was important to have normal people, not career politicians. Everyone's tired of these career politicians that start out at a, any level, and they move up and up and up. And one day the local congressman retires and they say, you'd be great for it. But the trouble is, Scott, they've never done anything. So
Right.
I talked to Barbara and I said, I really would like to run for Congress, and I really think I can win, because I had 31 years of auctioneering and my name all over Southwest Missouri, 32 years as a real estate broker, my name all over Springfield and Southwest Missouri as a realtor, and 6 years on talk radio from 99 to 06. Now, this was in 2010 when I actually started running in 2009. So I'd been off the radio for 3 years, but still the name ID that I garnered on the radio. And it's a name ID game. I probably told you that when you called.
Sure.
I had a fella call me today that's running for lieutenant governor here in Missouri, and he wanted my advice. And I'm like, I don't think I'd run because you have no name ID. Oh, I can get name ID. And so, but I've had a lot of candidates for different positions over the years seek my advice on whether to run or not. But it's a big name ID game. And of course, it's a big money game too. You have to raise a lot of money to run for Congress. But I gave up a very, very lucrative career that I developed over those 32 years in real estate and auctioneering, knowing that I'd be taking a huge pay cut to go to Washington. And we didn't move to DC. I'd go out on a Monday and come back on a Thursday. I'd go out on Tuesday and come back on a Friday. And Barbara would come out. She was a great asset, great help to me. And when we'd have an event in DC coming up and call people to invite them, the first question they say is, Barbara coming? And a lot of times she would, a lot of times she would not. But our youngest daughter was out there for 8 years after she graduated Pepperdine. She worked for NBC News in DC, and then she worked for Jason Smith in his office, worked for Joni Ernst, Senator Ernst, worked for the Motion Picture Association of America. And so she had a good 8-year career out there. And so once she moved out there, which was about a year after I got out there, Barbara came out quite a lot more often than when I was just going out to see Billy,
Sure. Now, Congress has changed an awful lot since you first went out there. I mean, in the past 14 years, it's a different thing. We called on you as broadcasters a couple of times, went to your office, went to D.C., and met with the senators as well as our congressmen. And, the D.C. that I remember going to back in the mid-teens, 2000 teens, and the DC of today, I don't think people realize the big black fence around Congress, which I believe is still up, is it not? Or have they taken that down?
No. It's long since gone. But
okay, so that's gone. But I mean,
yeah.
And you had the haves and the have-nots. You had the haves who had to be wearing masks all the time. You had the had-nots that didn't. I mean, it was a strange time. And yet you were there for all of that time. Tell us a little bit about how that's changed in your mind from what you saw when you first went to Congress and what you left behind.
Well, when I first went, we were at a different time. Obama had just passed Obamacare. People were furious about it. And so that created the Tea Party, the big wave of Republicans that went in. My year, there was 86 new Republicans, 86 newly minted congressmen, and 9 new Democrats. So there was 86 Republican congressmen, 9 Democrat congressmen. So we came in a huge wave. I believe we had around a 42 seat majority. Now juxtapose that to today, I think they have a 1-seat majority on the Republican side. And we really thought we could get a lot done. And then we ran up against the cloture rule in the Senate, which that is, if you can't get 60 people to agree to bring a bill to the floor, it can't come to the floor. And people would say, back in the day when we had the majority and we had the White House, so we had the White House, we had Congress and the Senate, and we had like 51, 52 votes in the Senate. And people say, well, why can't you get things done? You control the whole thing. No, you don't. And that is something, it's a misconception. The American public thinks that just because you have a majority in the Senate, that you're free to bring any bill to the floor, and you are not. So that was very disappointing that we had that huge of a majority. We took the gavel from Nancy Pelosi, handed it to John Boehner, and immediately found out that it's tough to get anything done, even with that majority. Today, they're facing this 1-seat majority that they have now. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Trump's doing very well. I went up and campaigned with him in Iowa. I went up and campaigned with him in New Hampshire. And I knew from day one that he had a lock on the nomination, but still I wanted to be helpful anywhere that I could. I talked to one of his folks yesterday. I stay in constant contact with the president. I got his cell phone. I can call him anytime I want, but I don't abuse that privilege because he's got all these lawsuits. They're accusing him of everything except being a decent human being. They're trying to bring all these politically charged charges against him, which is ridiculous. And if that was Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, they'd skate free. And if Donald Trump and Don Jr. and Eric had done what Hunter Biden and Joe Biden did, they'd be under the jail. They wouldn't be at Leavenworth. They'd be under Leavenworth. And so it's a difference being a Republican and a Democrat. So we just have to do the best we can on our side of the aisle. But it is a totally different place in Washington, D.C. After January 6th, the camaraderie between the Democrats and Republicans, a lot of it left the building. We had to walk through a metal detector to get on the floor to vote every time. And if you walked around that metal detector, as some did a time or two, it's $5,000 fine for a congressman not to go through that metal detector. And the strange thing was you could carry a gun on you. You could carry a gun in your office. You could carry a gun in the halls. You could carry a gun right up to that metal detector and lay it down on the table and walk in and vote and come out and pick it up when you got done voting. But if you had a nefarious purpose in mind or you were going to do something, those metal detectors were simply for show. Because you know, if you walk that far up with your gun and you want to do something bad, you could probably do it.
Now, so it's very different from what it was when you first set foot in D.C. as a congressman. Knowing that today, and you say could run for another term, which you can't, but if you could, would you?
I could. I mean, I'm free to run anytime I want, and but no, I don't have any desire to go back to Washington D.C. As a congressman or any other elected position. Now, Donald Trump has said that he'd like to have me in his administration. I did a lot of work with Japan. I got the Order of the Rising Sun, and if you Google that Order of the Rising Sun, you'll see that people like Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and Admiral Tony Blair, and not Tony Blair, Admiral Blair, I can't call his first name, but Admiral Blair received the Order of the Rising Sun, which is the highest, if you're not Japanese, is the highest honor you can possibly get. And the emperor normally delivers it to you and has a big event for you. But mine was during COVID, so the ambassador from Japan did that in D.C. at his house. We had a big event there for me to receive the Order of the Rising Sun. So if there was an opportunity to do, things, whether it be an ambassador to Japan or anything like that, or anywhere I can plug into the Trump administration, if I could do anything to help him and help this country, I'm going to do it.
Is what we see on television, what we read, what we hear, makes it sound like nobody gets along. Even some of the Republicans and some of the Democrats don't seem to get along with one another. But shed a little light on that. You must have had friends on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, I did. And, Nancy Pelosi and I got along swimmingly. I mean, I'd say I was her favorite Republican. We didn't agree on policy. I didn't vote with her on anything. But I'm a people person. I came from a sales background. I've sold something my whole life, whether it's real estate or auctioneering. And you got to be upbeat, positive, optimistic. And if you want to go around just screaming how terrible the other side is, when you need to do a bill, like we did a bill that helped Leggett and Platt down here in Carthage, and you got to have a Democrat to go along with you. So I could go to Pelosi and say, hey, who should I get on your side of the aisle to work with? So if you have a good working relationship with the other side of the aisle, it helps people in your district. Now, after January 6th, like I say, a lot of that camaraderie went away. A lot of Democrats wouldn't even speak to Republicans. And so that was another hill we had to climb, another cross to bear to try and get things accomplished. But right now with the internet and people, it seems like the crazier things you say, the more money you can raise if you're on the Hill, and the more times you can get your face on cable TV. I was never a big publicity hound. I always considered myself a workhorse, not a show horse. I tried to get things done instead of running down the block, 2 blocks to Fox TV from where we were, and get my face on TV every night and become a celebrity. And a lot of my former colleagues are now on Fox full time. I mean, I think that's why they ran for Congress. They, simply wanted to become a famous face on Fox News or CNN or whatever channel that hired them once they got out of Congress. But they pay huge money, several times what a Congress can make, just to comment once a week or whatever, just to be on their payroll so they can call you up and say, hey, we got a segment. We need somebody for 5 minutes this Friday or 3 minutes this Tuesday or whatever. And so that, I don't think that's helped Congress either, as far as people trying to get along and do what's right. They try and do what's right for themselves, unfortunately, instead of the country. But one thing I've been real pleased with is that my relationship with Eric Burleson's office and Eric Schmidt's office since I've been out. I had one just last week. A fella got a hold of me, and a lot of people, Scott, still think I'm the congressman, and I don't correct. I mean, well, Barbara and I'll be in a restaurant, and they'll come say, oh, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. I'll just thumbs up. You bet. Thank you. But anyway, this fellow called, and his wife was on life support or whatever, and she was going to come out of the hospital, and they wanted to take her to a facility. Social Security wanted to take her to a facility that wasn't equipped to handle her, and so he called in a panic. So I texted a lady at Schmidt's office that used to work for me. I texted a lady at Burleson's office that used to work for me. And within like 48 hours, they kind of double teamed Social Security Administration, and they argued with us. Said, well, you don't have this. I said, yes, we do. They provided that. Well, you don't have that. Yes, you do. You got it. We sent it to you, or they sent it to you before, Burleson or Schmidt's office got involved. But they got her in the proper facility, and the Social Security Administration backed off. And we've had similar things with the Corps of Engineers. People have issues down there. They'll call me, and I didn't have any pull with the Corps of Engineers when I was in Congress. And I found out now that I'm out, if I send something to Burleson or Schmidt, they have better luck with them than I do.
Things get done. Hold on to those stories, Billy. We're going to come back. You're going to share some more with us. We've got to go to break. We'll be back in a minute with more on Around the Ozarks Spotlight. I'm your host, Scott Meyer. Back in just a moment.
Hey, everybody. It's Ethan and Sarah Forhetz from your favorite podcast, Around the Ozarks in 5. I'm sure you've been wondering, how can I get even more amazing stories, events, and witty banter to start my day?
Well, look no further. Here we are. Sign up for our daily newsletter. You'll have what's going on around the Ozarks right at your fingertips each weekday morning.
Yeah, just go to aroundtheozarks.com, click on the newsletter tab to sign up.
Thanks for listening to Around the Ozarks in 5. We hope to see you in your inbox soon.
Welcome back to the second half of today's Around the Ozarks Spotlight. My very special guest, former Congressman Billy Long. And Billy was sharing a few stories as we got into the break. But you had mentioned, Billy, before we went to airtime, that you had some things that you wanted to share with folks. Why don't you throw those out to us now?
Oh, they're just kind of humorous things and not so humorous that happened. But one thing, I woke up Wednesday night, a week ago Wednesday, and I thought, I forgot, I didn't get my hamburger. And so I go up to Hy-Vee, and I told the butcher, I said, I was in here on like Saturday or Sunday, 4 or 5 days earlier, and had you package up 2 1.5 pound packs of hamburger, and I walked out without them. He said, why'd you do that? And I said, old man disease.
That's right.
And he said, well, we had one lady come in, and she ordered over $100 worth of meat. And she said, I'm going to go do some shopping, which is what I told him that day. I said, I'm going to walk around, shop, come back and get it. And she said, I'll come back and get it. And he said, well, when you come back, I'll walk you up to the front of the store, because that's the company policy. Because that much meat over $100, they're going to make sure you pay for it before you leave.
Sure.
So that's their company policy. So as I got my hamburger, I said, like Toby Keith said, don't let the old man in. I was referring to myself. And he said, it wasn't Toby Keith, it was Clint Eastwood. And I said, well, Clint Eastwood told Toby Keith, and Toby wrote the song. He said, there's a song? I said, yeah, it's a great song. And so anyway, when I turned around to leave the counter, I hollered back halfway across the aisle, and I said, because he said it was store policy to walk somebody up front if they spent that much, as the lady did. And I said, I got a good new company policy. Don't wait on old men. And I'd already told him, I said, I'm going to ring it up twice when I get up there, because I said, I'm not going to beat you out of your hamburger. And when I got up front, I told the guy, I said, this won't make sense to you, but I want you to charge me twice. Ring those up twice. And but as I was walking out, pushing my car before I went up to pay, I was walking around the deli counter there, and a lady comes up to me all indignant, and she goes, It was Clint Eastwood that said, "Don't let the old man in." And I'm like, yeah, but he told Toby Keith. Toby Keith wrote the song. It's a great song. There's a song, she says. I said, yeah, YouTube, Toby Keith, don't let the old man in. So that was one of the more humorous things that happened to me in the last couple of weeks. And another one, I had a fellow, I'd listed a house where I'm back in real estate, back in auctioneering. And we listed a house, and this gentleman's 87 years old and has Parkinson's. His wife's 87, has dementia. He goes every day of the world and sits with her out here at the care facility.
Sure.
And so he's very limited mobility. He's got a little electric cart thing, wheelchair in his house. But I went over there, and he leaves the door unlocked because he can't get up and get to the door very easy. So I just, came in. Anybody home? Yeah, I'm in here, but I'm stuck. And I said, what? And I went in there, and his recliner was completely laid out flat. The headrest, feet just laid out prone. Sure. And he's like a turtle on his back. He couldn't move. And he held up the plug in to his chair. And he said, I unplugged this by accident. He said, I've been stuck here for over an hour. He said, get down, see if you can look underneath the chair and find where it plugs back in. And Scott, I'm here to tell you, I haven't been on my knees in 25 or 30 years, literally. I mean, when I drop something under the dresser at home, I get two big cushions off the couch, stack them up, get down on my knees so it doesn't kill my knee. But I want you to know, I jumped down like a little kid on my knees for that old man.
Yeah.
And I started looking under his chair and could not find it. So finally I said, well, maybe I can get around back. And it was quite a circus. I don't have time to tell you the whole story right now, but I tilted him up, and then I ran around front, held his hands and picked him up out of the chair. And he limited mobility. He had one foot caught behind the other. And I said, can you move at all? And he said, yeah, I'll get it. And he finally got his foot around. And then he reached back to get in his wheelchair, and he hit the little toggle switch where the chair takes off out from under him. And I'm holding, he said, oh my gosh, it's on. So it was quite a fiasco, but that's
the chair came alive. Well, I think Rotary says a service above self. So you're still carrying that, the Rotary sign.
Get down on my knees,
It's so good to have you back home. I got to believe it was a good feeling, even though you did the 12 years and you did I think most of the things you wanted to accomplish. But it's got to be feeling good to be back in Southwest Missouri.
Oh, it's so much, and I didn't think I was under pressure when I was out there at all. But I mean, speaking of pressure, just pressurized air, flying through the air in an aluminum tube twice to get out there each week and twice to get home.
Sure.
Did take a toll on me. And it was a lot of pressure to be in Congress, always be on and, have to do everything and go over where that you had to go. So yeah, it's a godsend to be home and to be back in the Ozarks, which I never left here. I was home 3 days a week and out there 4 days, or I was home 4 and out 3, so I never lived there.
But you can't walk away from it. You've got a life out there. You've got a life here. I did it myself in business. I was working somewhere during the week for about 7 years and then home on the weekends. And my personal friends were like, well, why don't you move there? Or why don't you get a job here? And you really live two lives.
Well, yeah, and two of everything. I had to get a very expensive apartment out there. It wasn't big enough to cuss a cat in. A little tiny 1-bedroom apartment that was extremely expensive. Yeah. And now the second I left, they started giving them a stipend for the rent. Then they didn't, and so I had like 20% of my salary was cropped off the top to, pay for an apartment. Now, about 40% of the congressmen live in their office, which I think is inhumane. They live in their office and they take their clothes over to the gym next door and work out in the building next door, and then shower with a bunch of guys like junior high school, and then put on a, suit and tie in a sweltering shower, humidity, and then slouch back across the street over to the building. When I get up in the morning and I shower, it takes me about 45 minutes to just quit sweating,
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been the life for me living in my office. But I, like I said, I didn't go out there for the money at all, and did a lot better back here working in auction and real estate than what I ever did out there. But I just felt someone needed to do it that is not a career politician. And there was a lot of people in my class, Scott. Like I said, there was 86 new Republicans, 9 new Democrats that year. And there was car deal. There was another auctioneer besides me, Jeff Duncan of South Carolina. automobile dealers that owned automobile dealership. There was roofing contractors. There were plumbers. There were termite exterminators. There were nurses. There were doctors that came into Congress with me. So we really were people off the street. And, I voted against all the spending that I possibly could, but still in my time in office, we went from 14 trillion to $31 trillion debt. And I wasn't proud of that at all, but I voted against every single bit of it that I could. But one thing I found is that people say, oh, well, you need to cut spending, but it's always, don't cut you, don't cut me, cut the little boy behind the tree. And that's what our problem is. No one really seriously wants to cut spending in this country.
Billy, politically speaking, is that the failure of a democratic government? I mean, this experiment's only been going on since 1776, and it seems to me that if you want to get reelected, it's about giving everybody everything they want. And from business, when it's not your money, it's a whole lot easier to spend.
Right.
And we print our own money, and I really can't help but think that they just don't want to deal with it. They, being anybody in office, either side of the aisle, just doesn't want to deal with it.
And they won't admit that. The Republicans claim to be, I'm conservative. But when it comes, down to it, they want to be conservative on other people's programs and other states' programs and other cities' programs, other Democrats' programs, not Republicans, but not their own constituents back home, not people that are coming to them for help and handouts and things like that. So that's one thing I did learn in D.C. was that nobody really seriously gotten serious, even thought about getting serious yet about the spending in this country. And it's, going to add on and become bigger problem than it is. But there's not that many democracies that have made it 200 years. So we're,
right.
Like you said, it's scary to think of where we are in this democracy. Now in Missouri, constitutionally, they have to balance the budget every year. Why can they do that and we can't? They just passed a balanced budget last week here in the state of Missouri, but why can we not force the United States government to do the same thing? Is my question. And then it almost
seems that the rule of law has kind of gone by the side. And I blame both sides of the aisle. I don't want this to be a political show in that sense, but it's a little frustrating that there's red lines, but the red lines don't seem to mean anything anymore.
Right. And there's no accountability. I mean, you see these things where people get out of prison and the next week are out of jail. And the next week they get the charges dropped and then they go push somebody off of a subway platform in New York City and kill them. And then they smile as they're perp walking them out of the, up to the police precinct or whatever.
Sure, right.
And there's no accountability for anything anymore. Nobody wants to hold anybody accountable. And I mean, myself, you heard me tell the story the other night at the benefit auction. You and I were at a Special Olympics benefit auction where I served as the auctioneer here in Springfield last week. What was that? Saturday night, Friday night, Thursday?
Yes.
One day last week. And
right.
It was, I told the story that I was sitting over here in front of Culver's and Kaleidoscope on Sunshine behind a city bus. I mean, city buses are pretty big. 2 cars in front of me, and I'm sitting there, and I've been there 30, 40 seconds. I don't know, just sitting dead still because they're loading someone onto the bus that's having a little trouble getting, up and around and getting on the bus. And I hear this, and then my truck had 10,666 miles on it. And I think it's that 666 on the end that got me. But I hear just this god awful screech. And bam! And I thought, oh, my conscience. And then the guy takes off around me like he's going to run after he's hit me. And he pulled around the bus and pulled in Kaleidoscope there. And I called 911 to report it. And they wouldn't send anybody out. They said, no, we don't. If no one's hurt, they said, are you hurt? And I said, I don't know. My back hurts. But I said, I don't know if it's adrenaline or what. I didn't want to say yes, say no, because I really didn't know. My back did hurt, but I didn't know if it just because of, the adrenaline, being upset, about being hit. And so finally, they did eventually. I talked him into sending an officer out, and he wrote it all up, and the guy's got an out-of-state driver's license. He's in his girlfriend's car, girlfriend's insurance. And, it just rammed into the back of me. And I said, are you not going to give him a ticket? Oh, no, we don't write tickets. What? You don't write tickets? I mean, whatever happened to, and he wasn't following, he couldn't have written him up for following too close because he wasn't following. I was stationary.
Yeah.
But
Unbelievable.
just like that, I mean, the guy didn't even get a ticket for running into some old man sitting in front of Culver's and your kaleidoscope. So
it's a different world, Billy. I got to thank you so much for coming on today. Please come back again. I always love talking with you, and I want you to be able to talk about the book I'm sure you're writing.
I tell you, I could write a good book, but I don't think anybody would buy it, Scott.
Well, I'm busy writing my own, and at least I know my grandkids will someday.
Yeah.
Billy, I want to thank you again for being my guest on Around the Ozark Spotlight. Also, my producers, Taylor Worley and Jay Stevens, and all of you for joining us today. If you happen to miss all or part of today's conversation, you can find it at ATO Spotlight at AroundTheOzarks.com or the ATO app found in either the Apple App Store or Android apps. And there you'll find today's program as well as all of this past year's shows. I'm Scott Meyer. Remember, every day is a gift, and it's the best present you can ever receive. Have a great day.